Hey guys, my name's Lucas and I'm a car enthusiast. So I've been thinking about starting a YouTube channel for quite some time, but as you all know, life gets in the way and you want to go ahead and do something and it takes some time to get that accomplished. So finally, I feel I've built up enough content and also enough background experience and other things that I'd like to share and go ahead and get some content out there and actually start a YouTube channel. You might be saying, well, there's tons of different car videos out there, there's tons of different car YouTubers. Do we really need another one? Well, maybe we don't. But the thing is, I feel that through my experience in modding and other things that I've done so far, that I still have something to share and contribute to the community. A little bit about myself. I'm a scientist by trade. So I got my PhD in biochemistry, and I've been working in the sciences for quite some time now. First, I'll start off with that I bleed Ford blue. So I come from a family that's owned a lot of Fords, almost exclusively Fords, and American cars in general. So I am biased towards Mustangs. But I will say I do appreciate all cars, though. Trucks, off-road vehicles, all sorts of different modifications. I have a pretty open appreciation for it. Exotics, sports cars, anything. If it moves and it drives, I'm into it. You will see a lot of Mustang-based content, a lot of muscle car and pony car content on my channel, but in general, I enjoy all sorts of cars, so don't shy away from talking to me about cars or anything in general. Where did I develop my car enthusiasm and addiction from? As I just mentioned, I come from a family that has owned Fords almost my entire life. So my dad owned a 67 Fastback when he was young, and then that turned into a 72 Mach 1 eventually. My dad purchased a 1986 Ford Thunderbird, which I ended up driving around in my teenage and college years, which I absolutely fell in love with that car. So that really started my addiction and kind of need for a rear-wheel drive car, which I have a personal addiction to. So driving that 1986 Ford Thunderbird really gave me an appreciation for rear-wheel drive vehicles. I really absolutely fell in love with that car. It was from 1986. I drove it around in the early and mid-2000s, and it didn't have a huge amount of power, but it was a V6 from that time, about 190 horse or so. And my dad, of course, has kept it as a classic vehicle to this day. That kind of initiated my fuel and interest in cars, and I never went to shop class. I never took an automotive class necessarily, but coming from that kind of background, always hearing stories about Mustangs, you kind of get inundated and enjoy vehicles. As you get older, you start getting better jobs and so forth, and you get a little bit more money, and with that comes the modding bug. My first vehicle purchased new was a 2006 Chevy Cobalt. I absolutely love that car. Now, to be quite honest, at the end of it, the car turned out to be a piece of junk, I have to say. It had a lot of issues with it. The steering column gave out on me, on mine personally. There were a lot of people that perished and died because of the faulty nature of that vehicle, but it still holds a very special place in my heart. I think that vehicle could have been so much more if Chevy just did a little bit more with it. About 9 years, about a decade after owning that vehicle, I got my degree and I graduated from grad school and I got my first real job. And at that point I said, well, this thing's starting to fall apart. It had fuel leaks with it. I had multiple things replaced on it. I think there was an issue with the fuel pump as well. The car saw not that many miles, but a lot of heavy city driving miles, so it really took a lot of abuse. So at that point, I said, well, I like American vehicles quite a bit. So why don't we take a look at Chevy and then also Ford? Go back to my Ford roots and my family's Ford roots. And I went ahead and I drove a Chevy Camaro. I said, well, maybe I can twist Chevy's arm a little bit and drive a Camaro around and say, well, can you give me a deal on this car since the Cobalt turned out to be such a piece of garbage? So I went ahead and drove the Camaro, the V6 at that point. I wasn't looking at getting a V8 because I felt that would be a little bit above me, and also price range and fuel economy range, it wasn't something I was really looking at. So I drove that around and I said, okay, well, I like it. It's not bad. It has a nice sound to it. And then I went to the Ford dealership right across the street and I hopped into a V6 Mustang. And that was the end of it. I turned that car over and I drove it and I absolutely fell in love with it. Still is one of the best vehicles and most fun vehicles I've ever driven. That starts my segue and entryway into the modding bug. So I got the Mustang, and of course, one of the first websites that shows up is American Muscle's website. And all these other websites show up, and there's a billion mods out there, especially for the S197, since I bought a 2014 V6. That was about 5 years ago. So ever since then, since 2014, I've been bit by the modding bug. I had, and I will share a lot about the different cars that I've worked with and stuff. And the one was, of course, the 2014 V6, which turned out to be a full bolt-on, essentially full bolt-on. I didn't do a ported and polished intake. I'll get into that in another video, but that turned out to be a mostly full bolt-on vehicle. Absolutely loved that car and turned into our daily driver, actually. Fast forward a little bit, and we had a family vehicle at a certain junction, which was a Ford Fusion that my wife was driving around. And we enjoyed that, but it wasn't a whole lot of fun actually. It was a big boat. So then we decided to get a different vehicle, a used vehicle that was a little more of an SUV. So we went with a Tiguan, a VW Tiguan, kind of like a bigger version of a GTI basically. It was kind of fun, but we bought it used and it had a lot of issues. Within the first 6 months, it just had serious problems with it, with the turbo, with the wastegate. So I said, screw this. We were living in North Carolina at the time, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to wait anymore. I'm going to go ahead and buy my V8. At that point, I said, well, we got the V6. We're living in North Carolina. Weather's relatively good down here all year round. And when things do snow, everything shuts down, so you don't have to worry about driving around. So I said, screw it, and I bought myself a 2017 V8 Mustang. To this day, even so, it is the best purchase I've ever made. I absolutely love that car. So that brings us up to this point now, currently. Of course, there's a lot of little details in there. I've modded both vehicles at this point, and there's been a lot of history that's happened with those vehicles up until now. But I'm very excited to share content with you, to go ahead and get you up to speed on my builds, what's happened to some of my previous builds, and where I end up going. So this YouTube channel, I'm hoping, will be a whole smorgasbord of different things. So I'm hoping that we'll get a chance to talk about some of the mods that I've done to vehicles previously, currently, and in the future. I'm hoping to talk a little bit about and share my experiences during modding, modifying cars myself. I've done most of the modifications myself to most vehicles, and started from absolutely scratch. One thing that I also want to impart and discuss and talk about on my YouTube channel is that anybody can do this. Anybody can sit down and mod a vehicle and work on them. It's a great, fantastic pastime, and we are living probably in one of the best times to mod a vehicle right now. You can do everything really, everything from something really complicated to nitrous and boosted setups to anything really simple like putting on a cold air intake or any of those other small little mods you want to do, even just exterior modifications. It's all available, and it's all really not that expensive if you know where to look and you know how to do it. So what I'm hoping to bring to you with this channel is a perspective of somebody who started from absolute scratch, who's someone who just, as a kid, had the picture of the Lamborghini Countach on his wall, who heard about stories of a 67 Fastback Mustang and a 72 Mach 1, to somebody who actually got their hands dirty from their very first mod, trying to put a new grille in their 2014 V6 Mustang in the rain with no previous experience of unbolting something from a vehicle, to actually doing mods regularly and getting more comfortable with working on vehicles from absolute scratch, and just to show that anybody can do that. So I'm hoping to bring you guys that kind of excitement, enthusiasm, and show you that anybody can go ahead and do this, and hopefully share a bit of my experiences as well. As I mentioned, I think one thing that's really important is that through all these modifications I've done, there's always something that nobody talks about with these modifications. And I'm hoping that through all these modifications and all this, car sifting through forums and talking to people and going to different car events, that hopefully what I'll be able to talk with you guys about is maybe the questions that sometimes don't get answered for you, or even get answered for me sometimes when I'm perusing forums, when I'm perusing YouTube channels myself, and trying to look out there for different answers. Sometimes I can't find stuff still. So I'm hoping to bring you those things that are insights to me that you may not know up front, or you may not have the information for. I'm hoping to basically fuse and merge a couple of different things together. Since I'm a scientist by trade in my background, I usually take a very critical approach to things. And B, also, I like to work with my hands. So I take a critical approach to things, I like to work with my hands, and I love building and creating things. So I'm hoping to take all those passions together and bring you some quality content about modifications, about cars in general, about thoughts people have on cars, or anything else that they would like to share. So in starting this YouTube channel, I've started a little something to brand myself called MSH Garage, which is basically anyone who works with me, or for my vehicles myself that I've worked on, I've given myself that branding. MSH stands for Metastatic Speed Helion Garage. It kind of fuses a whole bunch of things about myself. So metastatic being from my background as a researcher and actually cancer research. So something that's kind of infectious, basically. Speed, obviously, being in cars, you want to go fast. Some people want to go fast. People have different goals. And then Helion just being a hellion, basically. Static Speed Helion Garage. What it means to me is that my need for speed and also my need for modifications and working on cars is addicting to me. And I love getting out there, I love driving, and I love the modification market, I love the car market. So to me, that's a very addicting hobby. So I felt like that name really brands me and brands what I want to bring to the table. Thank you very much. I appreciate you watching my introductory video, and I'm hoping to bring you a lot of content which I've had built up a little bit for quite some time over these next couple of weeks, months, years, or however long this YouTube channel goes on.